Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Or should I say namaste, in the spirit of the session in the morning. And there's a reason why I say namaste based on what Swamiji said, because probably I am different from all of you, and the company that I work for is much different than what all of you do. So whatever you take away today from here, the important thing is the underlying message would be, how do you want to reflect what you see today within your own world? So, and I'm going to touch upon those messages as we move on. Firstly, I'd like to make a clarification, because since yesterday, while I was introducing myself, I must say, and I feel in some ways happy that people come and give me the gesture saying, oh, we heard the Nokia announcement and how are things going on. So it's business as usual for NSN, and I'll come to a bit what NSN is all about. And just to correct, it's no longer Nokia Siemens Networks, it's Nokia Solutions Networks. The reason is because last month Nokia had purchased the Siemens share and it became a 100% Nokia company. So I'll speak more about the company in a while. Now, when three of us were discussing a while back, saying this topic about business impact and business case, it's kind of a bit tricky to speak today, especially on the second day, when on the first day, probably each and every speaker has touched upon the topic already, right? So the disadvantage is, how can we make this topic still more exciting for you, right, beyond what you've heard? So that's a challenge. But the second part is, I think, in a forum like this, when you come, it's also good to hear some things resonate, right? Probably you would agree that when you take away a few things, at the end of the day today, you don't have too many jargons, too many cliched statements that you have to list down and go back and implement. So if there are some consistent messaging going around, you know that it probably is the right thing to do, right? So in that way, I think it's a bit reassuring that what we have today for you kind of gets a bit deeper than what was spoken yesterday. So the distinguished speakers here also have some specific areas to touch upon, so I think they're complementing in a way a story, which you'll probably see. And hopefully we'll be able to get there. Now, business case for learning. There are two assumptions I'd like to make before I get in. One is, and we heard Amitabh yesterday, is that let's all agree that the CEOs and the CXOs understand that learning is important. Okay, so let's not go back into that discussion saying, oh, is learning important? That's given. I think they have their mind right now on it. But the challenge is, how do you get their ear and their heart eventually into it, right? They right now it's occupying their minds, but how do you translate that into the other ones? And the second assumption I would like to make already is, all of you sitting here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, believe that learning creates an impact. Is that right? Is there anybody in the room who doesn't believe that? I hope not. Okay, so I think that's a good note to start with, because what I'm going to touch upon here is probably a topic more of what we as a learning function should aim for, not only from a learning standpoint, but a business standpoint. And that we'll see in a few moments. So, firstly, who are we? Nokia Solutions and Networks. Very quick view. I don't want to learn everything. But we started off in 2007 with a joint venture between Nokia and Siemens. So, you could say in a way it's a new company, a 6-year-old company. But then what happened was Nokia and Siemens infrastructure got together and we created this new business. And I'll talk a bit more about some of our specific cultural challenges in a way. But what is interesting to know also, we have a rich heritage, right? So we have both Siemens and Nokia's heritage, which is more than 100 years old, to back us. And in terms of employees, we already see that we have about 50,500 approximately. We've gone through a tough time. Again, I'll try and develop it how that relates to the learning standpoint. And you can see that we're a sizable company in a way we operate it. So this hopefully gives you some clarity in terms of what this Nokia Solutions Networks does. So it is the networks business within the Nokia group. So no, we're not going to be part of Microsoft eventually when the deal happens. We will probably be the new Nokia, when finally things emerge. And still a big company, right? So hopefully this helps you look better. And then, again, it's a small world. I couldn't accommodate all our 300 customers that we work in here. But it's safe to say that a quarter of the world's population get connected over our products and services, right? And this, of course, we work with our customers who are telecom operators like Aircel, like Vodafone, dial a call, your network works well. But if it doesn't work, probably it's not on our network. Alright. No, I mean, we have a bad days as well. So I hope this gives you some context of where we operate and what we are. Let me move on. So what I'm going to do is, you'll see these statements here. So I'm going to make very simple themes. I know that all of us, over the last yesterday, I've heard a lot of jargons and trying to interpret what that means to your environment. But I'm trying to reflect here, like it says, very simple things that we are trying to do in NSN. So hopefully you will take away our own personal reflections. By no means am I saying that we are the best. Oh, I mean, clearly we didn't win any awards yesterday, right? So I'm not standing here to claim we are the best in class. But I think what you should know is, what are we doing to get there? And I think that is the key thing, right? I mean, it's always good to hear in reports that so-and-so company has won something, but what is practically happening on ground? And hopefully I will reflect that. Now this slide says about culture and context is key towards positioning learning, right? Good statement you have. Everybody agrees? You see that I'm smart enough that I didn't put content. And by the way, I didn't create this presentation yesterday night. This was there for the last 3 days. So whatever you see here is not something which I related to yesterday's session, but the reason why I put content out is we're all experts, right, in learning. So we do that quite well. Right? Agree? Yep. You guys are all experts in content. So how is culture and context within NSN? You saw in the previous slide, we started in 2007. And when we started, Siemens, Nokia. Some of you who know the European market know that how culturally different these countries can be, right, in some ways. I'm not trying to build a world war here, but the idea is culturally they are very different. German companies normally are very process-oriented, kind of go through kind of way to approach things. Finnish, on the other side, are probably challenging status quo all the time, and they want to kind of be disruptive and kind of thinking and out of the box and a bit unstructured. I'm not generalizing, but in a way, that is the way they approach it. So when the merger or the joint venture happened, culture became one of the key things within the organization for it to succeed, right? And again, humbly I say that in the last, before the last year, we've had a tough period, right? And this tough period has come in not only through our internal challenges, but I think some of the speakers yesterday from Aircel and the other gentlemen from Aditya highlighted the tough economic challenges that we have, regulatory challenges that we have in telecom. You guys all know what's happening in India. But clearly that kind of crippled us also for growth. But then we all know that how important people play a role in this context. And for us, the key there was how can we create a new culture, but a unique culture for NSN, right? And that was taking the learnings from Nokia, from Siemens, and creating an ecosystem that binds this together. And context, as I was telling you, we had a tough period, right? So I was inspired a bit yesterday when some of the speakers from Infosys and the others talked about investment, return on, was it investment? All right. ROI, yeah. So that was interesting and inspiring for me to know. And the hard reality is in some industries, you need to put it in context of how that works for your business. And again, I'm talking in terms of business, not learning, right? If we as a business are not profitable, we're not growing, given the market we have, then even things like learning and stuff don't probably stand a chance to get on the agenda of the CEO. So the first bottom line is, are you growing as a company and are you being profitable? And then how is culture and context that you're there supporting that? Right? So what do we do in NSN? Or what have we started doing for the last year or two? By the way, just to also set things in perspective, we no longer a loss-making company, we're profitable for the last year. So if that sounds assuring, what I'm saying here really works. And I think we've demonstrated 4 quarters of profitable growth. You could say some of it comes through hard restructuring, fine. But there are some other measures which I'll touch upon, which is not purely related to reducing costs, right? So the bottom line is we try to look at it as a holistic learning culture. Again, maybe just a very broad statement. What does it mean? People are empowered to learn. And I think the word empowerment sometimes doesn't get highlighted as much as it needs to be. Because when you talk about learning culture, and I'm sure all of you sitting here have got exposed to that dimension somewhere, I think this is very good article which Harvard Business had published in 2006 based on a case study. I don't know how many of you read that. Is Yours a Learning Organization by Darwin? Anybody here? Okay, so I think, and I've done it twice over in UBS and Darwin. That's a very simple study, and I really encourage, please contact me, I can show you that link. That's a very simple study to go back into your organization and implement it and see where are you within the whole learning culture curve. Because sometimes we take things for granted, right? We start believing that people need to work in a certain way. We decide in a boardroom and say, okay, this is our strategy, people will learn like this. But more often than not, you fail because you don't understand what on-ground people are feeling. And especially the demographic, and I don't want to stress that much, but in context of how different people are learning. So that's a very simple survey to understand where we are, but also beyond the survey, it gives you clear direction of where you should focus from your leadership, from what you do in your learning processes, and what you really create as an ecosystem around you, supportive environment, right? And that's where we've been focusing on, and we're trying to empower people to learn by themselves. Because we have the academy, it's about 200 odd people globally, almost 55,000 people. It's impractical to believe that these 200 people will solve the learning needs of these 50,000 odd people, right? I mean, that should not be the case. Each person should start owning up that responsibility of learning by themselves. Only then you build the learning culture. Else, you're just doing it one way, making it directional, and the whole concept of ROI and all that can come in, but it's really not engaging the workforce. The second point is about every day we believe is opportunity to learn. So there is not like a learning event week or learning event day. I know we can do a lot more on branding, what we do, and hopefully we'll do that as well. But the idea is people try to take opportunities on an everyday basis. I'll spend a bit more time in the next slide on that one. Right, innovation. Again, it's the advantage of speaking on a second day because we can piggyback on some topics yesterday. So there was this very interesting description of innovation somebody had highlighted yesterday, which was about successfully executing an idea, right? I think it was very good for me at least to kind of reflect on. And why do we say innovation? We as a company are highly technology oriented, right? So as I said, half, 40 of the world's population is connected to us. And believe you me, I mean, we have crises coming in as well. So there's proactive identification sometimes we can't, there are force majeure, there are earthquakes, there are all kinds of things happening, so networks are down. But then innovation, we stress a lot more because we are also designing the future for tomorrow. I know you need to stay in the present, but somebody has to think forward. And we need to kind of do that constantly because our customers, who are the operators, are depending also to some extent on us to help them serve their customers better. So I think what we want to make sure in a company like this is innovation is in the blood, right? And it doesn't matter where it comes from. And we of course have R&D centers, small R, big R, everything combined in India, elsewhere in the world, in Germany and so on. And these people are the ones who are working on what's coming 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. Just to give you one particular business dimension, is we are estimating that there will be 1,000 times more traffic that will be needed on your mobile devices, on what you can have access in years to come, in 10 years to come, right? By 2020. So just imagine what you're downloading today, 1,000 times more capacity that the networks will need to fulfill the needs of people in 2020. So we're talking huge investment. So we do invest a lot on development and research to make sure that we're getting there. So innovation has to be in our blood. Quality, I think customers like what we have in India and globally, want to have best experience in terms of users, right? For example, if you guys can't make a call, I can imagine I get frustrated when I can't make a call. So we are live all the time, right? So there is no sleeping time for us or shift time. We need to be active all the time. So the quality aspect plays a very important role there. And that's where, from the learning point of view as well, whatever we try to put our learning focus in, quality becomes an important criteria to emphasize. Service excellence, I don't want to spend much time, but you can read it that I think in an industry like this, it's making sure that people have the best user experience, not necessarily our direct customers like the operators, but their customers. So we always want to think about it. Social learning and knowledge sharing is very much embedded within the whole company. I'll just spend more time, I won't talk here. Finally, what is Academy as an organization in a sense? important thing, right? You all should ask yourselves, and you may have already done that, what is the role that you're playing? Are you a facilitator, enabler, driver, all these, kind of words knock you down sometimes, but we are the key enabler. So what we mean by enabler is we don't want to say that we will make sure 50,000 people, we serve them by ourselves. We don't want to kind of get an apprenticeship here and all of that. We are the enabler to make sure the business results are achieved through multiple ways. Okay, the second part here is about identifying your stakeholder value proposition. Again, I didn't get this slide overnight. Yesterday you heard this as well, somebody mentioned it. And this is a very basic discussion we did in the academy as well. Because again, we take a lot of things for granted, right? We start assuming that, listen, we should be doing this. So what we did as an exercise towards getting here is, apart from doing the learning organization survey, which I told you about, we went on ground and spoke to a few people across the world of how do you learn, when you're at your job. How do you prefer learning? So apart from the survey, there's also this flesh and blood interaction that we got, which helped us design this value proposition. So very briefly, maybe not spending so much time, you see here that we try to map our value proposition across our stakeholders, right? And I think this is probably a good exercise to do, though it may seem very basic, but it's a very good exercise to clarify this across the board. So what we want to say is our employees need to be effective at work, right? They should be comfortable, they should have equipped all the needed skills and abilities to do the work. Secondly, we are saying that a line manager needs to be able to concretely demonstrate that his team has improved performance. And I know, because I have an HR background as well, performance management is probably the most discussed topic in HR, right? And people tend to give less or more importance, but there is a concrete link to also some dimension skills. I don't say really that, to some dimension, the skill aspect as well. So we want to make sure line managers keep that. We want the business leaders to say that, listen, Academy has been able to help me build a strategic capability because tomorrow when a business comes in, I am ready with my team to go and get that, right? So we want really to give that confidence to our business leaders saying, you have the right kind of people who can get you where you want and achieve your targets. And finally, we also want our customers to say the quality of services and products that we do is world class. And all this happens because to our employee, you've been working. Finally, the bottom line it says about learn, performance, share. And again, these are not just words chosen randomly. There is really an emphasis on that where we want people not just to learn, but make sure they're performing on their job through specific examples which I'll highlight later. But more importantly, share. And the share word is very critical because the future of learning, I don't know if some of you have seen things going around in Khan Academy and this 2020 vision of learning, there's this good video, which is probably exaggerating the scenario, but it gives you an indication of where the future of learning is going. So more than we creating content, it's the user who's generating content. Right? And we want people, through their on-the-job development and all of that, create more content for us. So tomorrow there will be a scenario where Academy creates lesser content and people are creating more content. And we are enabling it, right, at the end of the day. So I think that's where we would hope to get. And this is just one simple slide. I'll try to explain. I don't want multiple slides. So how are we looking at learning holistically, right? Everybody knows the 70-20-10 model. I think it's probably the most abused terminology in learning. But we see that working somehow in our industry. Because, as I said, a lot of our engineers are doing research and development on the field. And especially the 70 dimension, of what we're also talking about, kind of resonates with how we want people to learn. Because at the end, we don't want everybody to come to the classroom and start expecting things to happen, right? We can give them enough food for thought, but we want them to go and execute and perform there. So there are a few things that we do. One of the things I would like to highlight is innovation from the academy that is NSNTube, which is very similar to YouTube, right? So this happened over kind of an exercise by one of our academy team members, where he created an NSNTube-like platform, which users can go and upload themselves. But beyond that uploading, that tool allows you to also capture your learnings in a very simple way with your voice and slides and everything. You don't need additional software, nothing. Just go to the system, have a microphone. If If you have something to share about your learning, just do that. So we've launched for the last 2 years, and I can tell you that there are thousands of videos now there. Are we capturing it, measuring it, ROI? There is a huge amount of, I can tell you, interaction, learning, discussion around it happening. And that's sometimes intangible, sometimes tangible. But the bottom line is we're creating capacity and the vision of sharing that we eventually want to get to. So we didn't force people to do that. They did it themselves. We gave them an enablement platform. So I think the academy there plays the role of enabling such things. By the way, that tool is also not only used for learning, it's now used for a corporate-wide communication platform. So if a CEO has to send a message, if the directors have to send a message, that's the platform they use. So it clicks with the executive board. They have a credibility now. The academy is saying, listen, you solve my business problem because I don't want to spend lots of time traveling, going to town halls. This could be a great platform, saves you money and larger income, right? This is one example of what helps. Probably the other thing that will be interesting for you is what we call the informal learning exchange, right? So again, this is a platform we developed over SharePoint through innovation, where we are encouraging people to create their own communities of practice, right? I mean, you've heard this name a lot, but in fact, in reality, we try and do that. So we create the platform for them, encourage people to come in, but after that, the user and the people around them try to get into the engagement results. And that results in a lot of insight for people, development on their job. So it facilitates all of that, right? And then we also have this connect, in a sense, like a Facebook. You can call it that. Okay, you can't upload pictures and share some photos, but that helps people to connect. So they have their own homepage, what they can do. They can post on others' walls, their own walls, share stuff. So what's happening here? You see that it's no longer one-dimensional, but it's learning all around you, right? So and that's what we need to kind of start creating more and more things. Will these all result in ROI right away? Probably not. It will come when it comes, but it is creating a capacity and an appetite towards being a learning organization. And I think that's the essential element which I'm trying to pass the message of. By the way, PDP, which is personal development planning, which line managers and employees should do on an ongoing basis. The way we're trying to emphasize this, one example is for a key talent, right? For the 1% of the population within NSN. Until last year, we had this general model saying, okay, the HR's key talent development team will communicate with these key talents and take them through the whole thing. So there were some learnings out of the 1 year exercise I was talking about, but this year what we said is keep the HR talent development team behind the line. Line managers, go and have this discussion with your employees. So we will support the line managers with all the content needed, perspective of what a key talent is, what you should do. But please go and have this discussion yourself. We are not doing it. And we have a calibration process, I don't know some of you do, which is very tough. I have been in those discussions. Where if I'm working for the academy with my other global colleagues, we come to a forum and discuss about the talents, calibrate, and also out of that, challenge each other in terms of identifying who should be there at the top, right? So potential talents and then calibrating. Why are we doing this? We don't want to create a culture of finger pointing, but what we're trying to do is make line managers accountable for their employees. If we don't try and do that, I think they'll still realize that the discussion will go on of performance management and still no clarity, or so employees will feel that the system doesn't work on merit because I don't know who's getting into somewhere. So all these, so we try to address that objectively and transparently. Right? So I'll move on. Positive time. The third part is for contributing to growth, profitability, and this is the customer experience. Now again, three things underlying there: growth, profitability, customer experience. Right? I started off my session saying we take two things for granted, and we look at business. Right? At the end of it, it's business. Team support. Now, while I understand the story that business support comes to employee engagement and development, as a learning function within NSN at least, we also try to see avenues where we can directly, not necessarily indirectly, but also directly support these things, right? And how do we do that? So, again, there are some words which you may think that are resonating, which is good, like demonstrating the value proposition you heard yesterday. So I think it's great building assurance that I'm not doing wrong. But the first thing talks about lean and integrating the business agenda up front. Why do I say this? I think there is some recognition in the audience here that when you go and try to kind of discuss this with your senior management, of saying, listen, learning has contributed towards growth, towards sales. Maybe most of the occasions you're far too late in the process, right? What would have happened if you had this discussion right up front at the beginning of the year, the business planning, not the training budget planning, by the way, the business planning meetings with your stakeholders, and got yourself in the agenda up front? I think it would have been a completely different dialogue, and that's something consciously we try to do. For example, I told you about our research and development function. There are two things which, from a learning standpoint, we really focus on. One is making sure people are efficient, so basically they are more productive, right? Because we don't work like an IT company where we have people on bench, and, because it doesn't kind of translate for us in our industry. So we need to make sure people get more productive because they need to address the needs of the future, so they need to have time for multiple things. Second is quality. And when we do the business planning exercise, we try to make sure at that time of the year, we try to embed learning within that business planning itself. And there is an agreement across the board from the head of the learning of the department, from the business head saying, right, so you were saying you're going to get me 70%, what people are doing now, 100% utilization, you will reduce it to 70% by this learning. You will ensure my quality scores go from 5.5 to 7.5, and you're saying these are the learnings that may help get there. Be courageous, put your stake in. If it doesn't work, that's a different story, but at least you're courageous, right? And I think the courage element is very important to come in, because what happens when, for example, a company doesn't meet its financial targets? Can anybody guess? If, say, they're given a guidance for the next quarter and it falls flat, what is the reaction internally within the company? Somebody wants to take a guess?
The training is not proper.
Okay, I'm not talking training now, business, right? So from a business point of view, what happens? Can you imagine who gets fired? The CFO, right? Most likely, because the CFO is the person who needs to make sure that what's getting, of course, there are multiple people who contribute to it, but he's the custodian of finances, the results, and so on. So when that can happen, and we always say CFO has a high position in the organization, be courageous to step up and get your stakes up there as well, right? And we all believe as well that learning has an impact, so we should not think twice now. We agree with that up front. Start with the business work. I think we made this clear yesterday as well. I don't want to emphasize, but it really starts there, and I'll show a model. The next slide which helps there. Leverage customer feedback and insight. In our industry in telecom, I think we're fortunate enough in some ways that we have a very deep dive feedback that comes in from customers. This is done by an external agency comparing competitors and all of that. So it goes to a lot more detail. And we take that feedback very seriously when we try to design learning. And I know in most occasions, certain things are not great. But it goes on to the level of also saying how is the quality of service provided by the workforce of an customer, right? So when this discussion comes in, we kind of make sure that becomes one of our business metrics to improve, concretely. And that could become, for us, a key impact area to highlight the business saying, listen, last customer survey you had this, but because of the things that we did, we could change it. Right, so just to kind of spend a minute, it should not have been only difficult times all the times, but even more difficult times because we've gone through many challenges. But only innovation has helped us. As you saw the example of NSN2, what we try to reduce, things through travel. For example, I'll give you one quick example. Like in Middle East Africa, in Middle East, the crisis going on there, so not too many people want to travel, right, for training. But our business doesn't stop locally on the ground. We need competent people there who can go and execute. So I think necessity is the mother of invention, as I say, but so that's where we bring in virtual, all kinds of dimensions into it and still get the business, and that gets us credibility from the business saying, no matter what the challenges, we'll still be able to deliver what we wanted. So I think those are opportunities. I think crisis can be a great opportunity for you to put things in. Get visible. Don't be shy behind the radar just because the session is going to hit you. Get up front and contribute to the scenario. Finally, I think it's the internal capability within the learning function. I can't stress on this enough because all of you sitting here, from your takeaway in the sessions from last time, there are just too many points, too many slides for you, right? But how do you translate it when you go back? And something which in essence we're trying to do now is make some level of investment on getting our learning team as well up the radar. If you want to say that performance is really that we want to measure, guys need to know how to go and talk to business on that level. Just by saying that, they will not be able to do it. And that's been our limitation over the past. We just tell people that go have a strategic discussion with the business. Does that poor guy know what strategic discussion is? We take it for granted, right? It's supposed to be done. So we're doing some investment in making sure people, like we call them learning managers, but they get the perspective and understanding of what it takes to have that discussion. And once they have that discussion, it increases the credibility of the business. So my last and final slide for the last is about this model. Again, I don't want to complicate it, but I think you've seen this model in the ROI process and all that, but it's an adaptation in a way of how, if you're taking performance as a criteria within the learning function to focus on. By the way, I don't think learning is the panacea for all the problems. Sometimes we just overemphasize that, and then the CEOs come and tell you, can you fix this through learning? Challenge increase. Because some of you know the skill build model. You know that? How many? No? Okay, that's the most simple model that I've kind of learned. So assuming a CEO comes to you and says, listen, I have this real problem within the team, they're not really performing their job. Maybe it's because of competency, they can fix it. The way we try to challenge this now, we're saying, really, you're telling me that learning will fix the problem? Let's discuss, right? And when we discuss it, there's a structure around it saying, there's a skill element why people are not doing their job, right? Because they're not capable of doing it. So that's purely the skill part. The will part is somebody knows how to do it but doesn't want to do it, right? It's because he's getting paid less, his boss is really harassing him, multiple reasons. And then the hill is that though he has the willingness and the ability to do it, your processes are so cumbersome that the poor chap ends up kind of spending hours and hours but still not achieving that. So my point is, think beyond learning when you're going into these discussions and get your collaborators into the space. So it's a very simple model of skill build hill. I think it sounds very simple, but when you discuss this with the stakeholders, you will see that there is credibility again coming in to what you're talking, because you're just not saying, okay, let's fix this through learning, but you're challenging status quo and bringing in perspective. So here the model again emphasizes that where on ground you need to get to the finer detail. You just can't say we will achieve performance result. Get down into the minute details of what it needs. And these are hard discussions minded. We've had this exercise done and then it wasn't easy. The business doesn't understand sometimes what we're talking. You need to educate them and get them to a certain level. So, finally I want to sum it up by saying eventually the question is ROI. Agreed? Right? What is return on investment? For me, actually, it's return of it's the risk of ignorance, right? Because ignorance on two counts. Ignorance on one count which says, I believe that learning will achieve everything, and, solve all things, and people should start understanding it. I don't know why they don't understand. So if you have that feeling that why aren't people understanding it, that's a risk because you need to make them understand. On the second side, it's also about saying, can everything that counts be conquered? Right? Somebody said that. So, not really. But the important thing is, if you're not getting needed business alignment there in place, the first part will not be covered. So, I think there's somewhere the space in between. What the space is, I can't tell you now. I just gave you a story about it, it's maybe a bit too long. But my message to you is, take 2 or 3 things out of the 2 days that you have. Don't get the number of slides counted and go back to your manager and say, do this. Start small somewhere if you have it already. But you will see that there are results coming in, and it increases the credibility of the learning function. So I'd like to end there.